On this episode of Black in the Stacks, I chat with Kayla Turner Thomas about her film, Framing Freedom, the inspiring true story of Black land ownership in Mississippi. It's a gripping feature length documentary told through the lens of Thomas's grandfather, Henry Harris, a retired second generation farmer whose father, John Harris, managed to buy and keep farmland while Jim Crow laws were still in effect. Aiming to enlighten and inspire, Farming Freedom looks ahead to opportunities for closing the wealth gap between non Black and Black landowners today, as well as details of the past. Kayla Turner Thomas is a two-time Emmy nominated creative services professional and producer. She has worked in television for nearly 15 years and is a proud member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated.
Well, good evening. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great as well. Thank you for asking, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we'll just jump right in. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, your background, and what brings you to the show today?
So, my name is Kayla Turner Thomas. I am a newly established independent filmmaker. I've been working in local television professionally for like 13 years. And so I recently took that leap out on my own and created my own work. And it's been very rewarding seeing, what you can do on your own. And so that's really what I've been doing lately is figuring out what my next project will be, and just enjoying this experience as a new independent documentarian.
Yeah. So before we get too deep into the why of your documentary film, Farming Freedom, let's talk a little bit about research. So, what sources did you use? And of course, I have to ask you, did you visit your local library?
I love that question. So I didn't visit my local library, but I did use a lot of the online resources that libraries are making available to you now. So that was really cool. The biggest piece of my research, I would say, came out of the Mississippi Encyclopedia, which is available in public libraries. And what it is it's a huge, it's a massive amount of research that was put together to pretty much compile every piece of Mississippi history that you could think of, and so many good um uh what do you call it, entries were done that were relevant to what I was writing. So to find that, I found it online, and then I also ended up buying the hard copy of it because it's just an amazing resource, and so many professors and just people who had already been doing this kind of research contributed to that encyclopedia, and they were able to make it this amazing piece of work. So got a lot of information out of that Mississippi Encyclopedia, and then also just a study that was done by the USDA that was also really really helpful, and it had been published. So it's probably available in a library somewhere, but it was also online.
So how long would you say was just the research part of the documentary? And then did you find yourself doing even more research after your initial, I guess, run through after you started filming?
Yeah. So this project was initially just an interview with my grandfather. So it was just a family. It was initially supposed to just be a family video documentation, oral history kind of thing. So I had not done any research about this topic going into that interview. That interview was strictly just me wanting to record the story I had heard all my life growing up, was how we acquired our land. And so once I got the interview and I started putting it together, it just turned into so much more. And that's where the research started. So from things that my grandfather would say in his response, I would research what the broader historical context of it was, and go from there. And so it turned into a very extensive research project. It took me 7 years to finish it. so so
Wow.
it turned into quite the research project. But and then some of those years, like, I took some months off and just kind of took a break from it, tried to figure out where I wanted to go with it. But it was definitely a huge amount of research after I had done the initial interview. And then I went on to add other historians, like to do additional interviews to like really, round the whole thing out. And so that's how it all came together.
Yeah. So out of that initial conversation with your grandfather, did you have um like a nagging feeling or something that just kind of resonated with you really, really deeply, like one or two things from that conversation that led you to want to continue researching it?
Definitely. It was pretty much everything he said. Like, it was crazy because, like I said, it was initially just supposed to be this video project for the family where, all my life, I just grew up hearing my granddad tell this story about how we acquired this land. He said his father bought it after he left this sharecropping situation, sharecropping plantation, and he bought his own land. And so as he explained that story, then I started to look into, well, what has been the story of Black land ownership? But then as he kept going, he would talk about stuff like, okay, well, in the off season from farming, we would spend time at the levee camps on the Mississippi River, cutting pugwood. And so then that took me down a rabbit hole to find out, like, well, this apparently was a common off-season job for sharecroppers and farmers because it was a very dangerous job, and those were the jobs that were often reserved for Black people. They would call it Negro work. And so he told that story, which sent me down that rabbit hole. And then he also spoke about just the lawsuit that was filed for farmers back in 98 and 99 and turned into one of the largest class action lawsuits one of the largest civil rights class action lawsuits. So he was actually a part of that lawsuit. So everything he said just took me deeper into research and created just another subject to dive into, but then bring it all back together to say, okay, well, this is the story of Black farmers and Black landowners, because it wasn't that they could just make money off their land. Most of them had to have another job. So they had to work at a levee camp, or they had to work in a factory. That was another one of his jobs that we talk about in the documentary. So you just find out, or they had to work on neighboring land, so a white landowner has all this land and they're able to make their land successful, and they're actually hiring people who have their own land, but these are Black people who don't have the access and the resources to actually make their land lucrative. So they have to spend their time working on someone else's land. So he talked about all of that. And in the research, I found out it was not unique to him. Like, this was the story of so many Black farmers.
Yeah. I think that that's super cool that you got a whole documentary out of, just being curious to talk with, your elder in your family, and pursuing that. Memory work is kind of what it's encompassing now, like oral history, memory work, that sort of thing. But in the film, you are documenting a history of land loss and systemic theft, which are topics that carry a lot of ancestral trauma.
Yes.
How did you protect your own spirit and energy while filming such heavy truths?
That was hard because I feel like after every just research deep dive, I was upset.
Yeah.
You get a little, you get emotional, and you get, you just like, you get worked up, and it's just like, man, our people have been through so many things, and we just still find a way to persevere, and it's just all the cliche, still I rise, but it's so real, like, it's so true, because when you really put together these timelines and you're like, man, it makes you proud. It makes you proud. And that is how I would say I probably combated the emotional trauma, was that out of all of it, I will still come out proud. I was very proud of what Black people had done to still be able to, you know, hold on to their land, or if they just those things, just they really end up just making me proud.
Yeah. And you can feel that sense of pride too, just from the trailer alone.
Thank you.
Yeah, just,
Thank you.
when you initially reached out and, I went and I watched the trailer a couple of times. And I was like, I want to see the whole thing.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, you honestly really do feel um that sense of pride, and you can feel um again from a trailer, for everybody that's listening, from a trailer you can really feel um the heart and the soul and the promise that you put into um the film overall. So I just,
Thank you so much. Thank
yeah,
you. It
of
was a
course.
labor of love. So thank you
Yeah.
for saying that.
Of course, of course. So speaking of labor, there is a difference between filming labor and filming liberty. So how did you choose to visually represent freedom on screen without relying on typical tropes of struggle?
Yeah, that was a big part that I think I, was a big part of like writing and rewriting, and especially when it came to like how I described what the film was about. You know, like initially I would talk about like, it's about the history of sharecropping and the history of land ownership and all these like really hard things where it's like, the history of land laws. But I, somewhere around like along those lines, I was like, I have to find, I have to still make this like feel hopeful at the end. You know what I mean? So I started to kind of reshape the way I even describe the documentary. So it's more about looking back to look forward. Because at the end of the documentary, that is what we do. That's what I talk about. I talk about, well, what's next, because we spend a lot of the time telling you the history and telling you, what's currently happening. And then I wanted to really wrap it up with an empowering, inspiring note. And that's what I think I was able to do with the help of one of the people I interviewed. His name is Otis Wright, and he's a farmer advocate. He's advocated for farmers for his entire career. Now he also actually works for USDA, still advocating for farmers. So his part of the documentary was crucial to showing people that there's more out here. There's still more to do. There's hope. There's been some progress that's been made. There have been some things that have been put in place that can help you hold on to your land, or help educate you and provide access, because that's what a lot of it was about too. It's like these things are out here, but we don't know that they're out here because we're intentionally being shut off from this information. So that's what it was about, was finding those advocacy groups that are put in place for you as an underserved farmer, as a minority farmer, what's out here to be a support for what you're doing. And if you've lost your land, what are some ways you can look into getting your land back? Or what are some ways you can look into making money outside of agriculture on your land? Because that's also usually the part that as Black people who may be living in a city, or just more modernized, living, and you don't want to go to that land in the middle of nowhere and maintain it, right? But maybe you can rent it out to a commercial farmer. Maybe you can think about having a wedding venue on it. Like, there's so many other things you can do with your land outside of agriculture that you can still find some kind of just you'll find a future in it. Even if you think like, I'm not a farmer, but your family has land and there's something you can do to keep it alive. And so that's what the end of the documentary talks about. So I feel like that's what I wanted to make sure it wrapped up with, so that we didn't get sucked into, like you said, the tropes of struggle and stuff like that.
Yeah. I was gonna mention it, but you beat me to it as far as like having like wedding venues. In another life, I was a wedding officiant. Um, and I actually did a wedding on a farm. They were not Black, but I did do a wedding where a good chunk of their land was commercially used, but then they
Yep.
had another part that was just strictly for like weddings,
Yep.
birthday parties, just
Yep.
so they had multiple streams of income.
Yep.
And it was family land that they just, figured out a new way, like you mentioned, to keep those funds going so that they can hold on to it.
Yep.
And another thing that you said too is knowing, as Black people who own land, they don't often know what resources are out there. So I think that's awesome that you put that at the end, to kind of end on, a lighter note, full of
Yes.
joy.
Yes.
Yeah. Because
Yep.
documentaries like this can be really heavy sometimes.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Yep. And
yeah.
that's how I feel. I feel like I started off very heavy. And so to end it on something inspiring was important to me.
Yeah. So let's talk a little about where soil and soul intersect in the film. When you were either out in the field or just kind of reviewing some of the footage of the farmers, did you ever feel like your ancestors, were kind of backseat driving, the project itself? And if so, was there a specific moment or was it just throughout the whole process?
That's a really cool question. The biggest thing for me that comes to mind with that is the photo that I had to look at of my great grandfather throughout this whole thing, because I used his image a lot, because a lot of it was how he acquired the land and everything that he did for his family afterwards. And I couldn't stop thinking, like, there's no way he knew that this photo was going to be used in this capacity. Like, that is amazing to me that this photo is now, on a poster, and it's, being used, as we talk about the documentary, just all across the country. And I never met him, and so to see his image and then to be able to use his image like that, I hope he's proud of it. You know, I hope he can see that, and that he would see that and say, okay, this is why I did this. This is why it was important for me to get my family off of this other person's land and to get us our own land so that I can have a great granddaughter tell this story. Like, I believe that I believe that, and so just his image was a real motivating force for me the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah. You said something too that kind of struck a thought. I think, and I'm sure you go into this in the documentary, but the idea that, your great grandfather even had it in him to be like, I want more for my family. How can
Mm-hmm.
I do that? Especially during a time where owning anything as a Black person was slim to none, right?
Yep. Yep.
So for him to have the foresight, the grit, the know-how, and the
Yeah.
resilience too,
Yes.
because I'm sure he went up against a lot of people that were either
Mhm.
trying to scheme or just flat out shutting him out.
Yep.
But he persevered,
Yeah.
um, through
Yeah.
all of that. Yeah.
It's amazing. And then when I think about, like, the parts of land ownership that didn't occur to me were a big deal, because you think about land and you just think, okay, it's land, you can farm it, whatever. But it came down to stuff like burying your loved ones, a dignified burial. That's
Mhm.
something that you weren't able to do as a Black person unless you had access to land. Building a home for your
Mm.
kids. I mean, he was really able to give all of his sons and daughters a head start because there was land that he could build them a house on.
Mhm.
And that was like a wedding gift. It was like, you get married, we're gonna all get together and build you a house out here. And that is already gonna put that unit ahead. That's
Yeah.
gonna be the head start. And that's the part that I know I always took for granted growing up, was that you're that much further ahead because of the decisions that the generation before you made.
A little bit of a fun question as we talk about this intersection of, soil and soul. If you had to pick a specific plant or crop that acted as a consultant for the film, what would it be, and what did it teach you about resilience?
That's so fun. I was thinking about that. I was trying to think of a good answer for that. Because my husband has a It's actually getting too big for me to call it a hobby garden at this point. This man is
Mhm.
about to have a whole farm in the backyard, but so I'm trying to think of, like a crop that I would think to connect that with, but I don't know. I don't know if I can think of like a really good one. I mean, corn is amazing to me. You plant that stuff, and if you take care of it, I mean, it grows
It grows.
so
Hmm.
tall and so plentiful that does make me think of the potential of what a family unit can do when they're provided with the proper the proper resources, proper foundation, a proper start. Because so much of gardening is getting a good start. If you
Hmm.
are, or farming, I should say, if you have your plants and you just put them out there, they may get burned up by the sun, right? But if you took some time and nurtured them under a controlled environment and created these, starters is what you call them. You let them sprout up a little bit, and then you transplant and you transfer them out into your garden. You've given them such a great foundation. You've given them strong opportunity to build these strong roots. That does remind me of what we can do, or what we're able to do when we have that good head start, that good foundation, that solid just nurturing in the beginning. You know.
Hmm. Yeah. And a lot of us don't have that. Outside of, just agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much every field you can think of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Business, education in some
Mm-hmm.
regards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it having that little leverage or leg up,
Mm-hmm.
um, just to get started makes such a difference.
Yep. It's,
Yeah,
it's a
it's
world of difference. It's like the night and day. Like it really
mhm,
does. Yeah,
mhm,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Um, so want to pivot into what we were talking about earlier. So, like the solutions that you give at the end of the documentary. So, systemic roots and radical solutions. Um, if Farming Freedom was not a documentary, but a medical prescription for a sick society, what would the dosage be? And what are the expected side effects of watching it?
I think you definitely, the dosage is watch it, take it all in. It's 85 minutes. So, I don't think breaking it up is good. I think you should just, take it all, because it's a lot of information, but I think it's shaped in a way where it will hold your attention. But I think the side effects is and this part is still blowing my mind because I never expected this, but the number of people that come up to me after they watch this and say, "Oh my goodness, I am now thinking about my family's land, and now I'm about to call my family and see, like, what are we doing? Are we making sure it's protected?" Or they're thinking, or they've said something like, "Oh, we had land and then we lost it, and now this makes me want to work towards acquiring land and making sure that we never lose it again." Like, so I'm getting all this kind of feedback of people who are genuinely inspired to either make sure that their land is protected, or either to seek out ways to acquire land on their own. Just now getting the full context of like how revolutionary it is for a Black person to even own land, and how impactful that is. So
Mhm.
that's the side effect I would say is you people are inspired to, like I say, either take care of what they have, or create something for their next generation.
Yeah, of course. Um, we live in a culture of hustle, right? Every day I'm hustling. Not to quote that man, but every day I'm hustling. How does the slow, sort of rhythmic pace of farming act as sort of a form of protest against a capitalist system that wants us to produce more and more rather than grow?
Yeah, I think just the patience that farming demands it's out of your control. As far as like, you can't make it go any faster. You can make it yield a a nice size crop, with the amount of attention that you give to it. You can impact how much it yields, but you can't make it go any faster. And that's kind of life, like you can have an impact on what how successful you are, or like, the kind of life that you're able to create for yourself, but you can't necessarily make it go faster. Some things you really have to see, you have to let them play out. You have to work within a sequence of events. You have to be within a certain timeline that's totally out of your control, but you can, focus on what you are doing, yielding something great for you. And that's what that reminds me of.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to give an analogy about my failed attempt at having my own little thing, but I didn't have the time to. I just had a couple plants, right? Like we had, I think, zucchini, we had tomatoes, we had basil, and some other herbs. The other herbs, like they did what they did. That was fine. That little basil plant, that was my thriver. That thing produced no matter what, like whatever the weather was. It was those little tomatoes. We got one good harvest, and they were like, "Yeah, we're done. This Georgia heat is hot. You don't got us in no shade." And I tried to like position so that they would get like some sun, and then when it shifts, they would get some shade. No, that's Georgia heat. It don't matter where you are.
Yep. And that's farming. It's so much of a trial and error, plant, like gardening, it's such trial and error. And, and like you said, you'll plant some stuff, and then you have to really kind of wait to see how it responds to the environment that it's in. Then you find out there might be too harsh of an environment, or that, maybe it needs to be a more mature starter before you put it out, so it's a lot of trial and error, and that's what I mean. I never thought about this until you've asked these questions, but there's just so many analogies you can make when it comes to farming and just life and getting the things you want out of life, because it is life is so trial and error. And a lot of it is about the environment that you're in. You talk about your plant. If it's in the Georgia heat, maybe it needs to be, shielded, so it's so many analogies that you can make with life. That's really cool.
Yeah. That's your second documentary.
I know.
Listen, this is the second podcast I've done where I've given somebody an idea. Right. I just need an EP credit. That's all I need. I need no money.
Right. Let's get you the EP credit.
So your film is being distributed by Collective Eye, which focuses on films that matter. So how does it feel to see your grassroots story about Black land ownership move into this global educational space? And does that help or maybe somewhat hinder the mission of your film?
I think it's totally helpful. It's very exciting. This is my first distribution, so hopefully I have the same answer in a year. We'll see, how well they do with the film. But I researched them, and I feel like I vetted them the best I could, and they seem to be a very serious organization, a very serious distribution company that's serious about educational documentaries. And that's all I can ask for, because I remember doing a workshop that talked about you have to know your documentary's audience or your film's audience. And so for me, that said, okay, I belong in the educational market. I love educational television. I'm a PBS kid. That's what I'm thinking of anyway. So it's no need for me to even try to venture into the theatrical world. That's really not where I'm supposed to be. The things that I'm trying to create are to teach. And if anything, I want to put them further into the classrooms. So I'm working with some teachers to create an educational discussion guide for grade 6. We're going to do middle school, then we're also going to do high school, and then we're going to do like a college as well as a community level. So I think it's a great thing, and I think it's very exciting to be with a distributor that has that kind of focus, because there were some people that I was some distributors I was talking with where they kind of do it all, which I've never really been a fan of the one-stop shop kind of model because something is not being done as well as the other part of whatever you got going on. So if I run into a company where they're like, this is all we do, they're like, we are educational distributors, I'm like, cool, let me learn more about you. So I think it's the perfect home for Farming Freedom. Everybody's been super helpful, great people at Collective Eye, and I do believe they're going to take it to, continue to take it as far as it can go, or as far as or further than I could take it alone. And that's the big part of it, is that you can only go so far independently. And there were some things that I was able to do on a local level, arrange some screenings, got a screening here with our Civil Rights Museum and stuff like that. And so I was able to do some things, but as far as like taking it even further, I definitely am excited to have an experienced distributor lead that. And like I said, I've already seen that it's been purchased for the Ann Arbor District Library in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I know that's probably just only one. And so I'll get more information on where all it's been purchased later next month. As each quarter I get more information on who's signed up for who's purchased the film and where it's being shown and stuff like that. So having that international distributor, I'm really excited about.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure it takes that pressure off of you to have to, constantly be promoting it, looking
Yep.
for, places to screen it, looking for,
Yep.
opportunities to get it in front of, your target, audience and everything. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And I looked at their website too, and the documentaries that they distribute. And they are really true to their saying of films that matter. Because there were a couple I was like, I need to check those out.
I know. It's a few of them where I'm like, okay, I need to get that.
Yeah. So of course this is Black in the Stacks. So I have to figure out a way to incorporate some literature into the discussion. So the next couple of questions will focus on that. In the book, The Bone and the Sinew of the Land, author Annalisa Cox shows that Black farmers were actually some of the earliest and most successful pioneers in the Midwest, way before the Civil War. In your film, how are you using this sort of forgotten history of Black farmers to change the way people view Black farmers today?
So that like you mentioned, that book talks a lot about the Midwest, which is very fascinating. If people haven't read that, they should check it out, because you do become aware of how much Black land ownership or the effort of Black land ownership was happening out west, and then also being taken away at the same time. But on the other hand, my documentary focuses primarily on the South versus the versus the West. And so with the South, it was just such an eye-opener that you had so many Black people who actually did accomplish land ownership, but only to have it taken away, right? So and when you look at it, on like a larger scale, where you're like the population, it still was a small population of Black people, but considering a group that just got out of slavery, were just free from enslavement, it was pretty significant, to have 20,000 plus Black landowners in Mississippi. So that was a big deal. But you just so that's the part of the forgotten history that I wanted to tap into, is that's a piece that people just don't know. I didn't know that. I didn't know that there was that much Black land ownership in the state, that there were actually that many Black people that did find a way. And there was, obviously there were white people who had to sell them the land. So all white people weren't evil, right? Some of them actually, did whatever, to make money. It was still just a business transaction. And so all of that is, I believe, forgotten history, in terms of just understanding that there a substantial group of Black landowners. As a matter of fact, Mississippi had the second largest population of Black landowners, which you don't expect that because it's Mississippi.
Exactly.
So that's more of this forgotten history, and
Mm-hmm.
we just don't know. We didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know that. So it's definitely tapping into that forgotten history. But again, it just goes back to that pride and just imagine what these folks went through to be able to acquire that land. And it's just unfortunate that it was stripped away, but the forgotten history part is that they even did it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Another book that came up as we were preparing for this conversation was Rooted by Bria Baker. So in that, she covers the theft of, and this number blew me away, 12 million acres of Black land. She covers the theft of that. And because of that theft, she also goes into how it created the modern wealth gap.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Do you see sort of the urban farming movement as a way to physically reclaim that lost wealth, or is it more so a mental freedom of owning what you grow?
I think it's more of a mental freedom because if you think about like what we lost when we lost land, we lost the generational wealth that came with owning land, just the ability to collateralize your land and stuff like that. You can't necessarily do the same thing with an urban farm, because it's not as large enough of a scale to actually collateralize it, but it still is very important because like you just said, it's very freeing and you can, you can directly grow what you're eating. You have control of what's going inside of your body. That is a big deal, for anybody today, especially with the stuff that's in the grocery store. You just don't know what you're going to get. So if you are somebody who's growing your own food, that is very freeing. That is a big deal. And so, I think as far as the generational wealth part, that was stuff that we can't necessarily get back, but we can only figure out what our next generation needs to know or be armed with so that they can pick up either where that last generation left off or kind of start something entirely new. It's because I just think about like my great grandfather. So he initially had 120 acres. And when he was getting ready to retire, he sold half of it. And all of that to me it just says that you were not aware or the opportunities were not made aware to you of what else you can do to have a comfortable retirement without selling your land. And that's something we can't get back. There's no they're not selling that 60 acres back to us. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah.
so a lot of times once that's gone, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But you can at least have control over your what you eat and what you take in and what you feed your family.
Yes, absolutely. And within that, like the ownership of um, growing your own, where you get your starter seeds and all
Mm-hmm.
of that stuff, that's important too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because not every strain of seed
Yep.
is a good one.
Made
To
equal,
put it
right?
for
They're
right,
not all
yeah,
made equal. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing as far as like just looking for the best place. Like I know a lot of states have like some kind of ag extension program like with some kind of
Mhm,
nearby university, so that's a good source to look into, especially if you're trying to get your soil
mhm,
tested and stuff like that. But
mhm,
yeah, you definitely have to like look for the community of farmers and they'll tell you where to go. Like they'll let you
mhm.
know like don't get them seeds, that's a waste
Yeah,
of time.
right,
Like don't go to Home
right.
Depot. Them Home Depot seeds don't work. Stuff like that.
Mhm.
Like go over here to this,
Yeah,
garden place that, so
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And a big thing with I mean it's been a big thing, but not every library system does it, but they have seed libraries.
Oh
And
yeah.
so yeah, so most of the time you can go to if your library has it, you can go there and they do limit how many you can take, right? Because it's a
Yeah.
library that they don't have a lot of money despite what the people are saying. Um,
Yeah.
I know I was in
Yeah.
them for 17 years,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, but yeah, so they're,
That's
the people
cool.
who started those are truly passionate about
Hmm.
like, growing and gardening and farming
Hmm.
in general. And so they're making sure the seeds they get most of the time are ethically sourced.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so that, you're not
Yeah.
you're not taking in something bad and putting bad
Yep.
out into the community that you serve.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's cool. See, libraries. I didn't realize those were like at some
Hmm.
like library. That's really cool.
Yeah. One library system in Georgia, they have in, I think, a couple of branches, but I know specifically one of their main larger hub branches, they have hydroponic garden in the library. So
Oh,
if
wow.
you, for whatever reason, didn't have lettuce for your sandwich, you could just go and like cook you some
What?
arugula.
Oh, that's cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Support your local library.
Yes.
Okay. So before I ask my closing questions, is there anything that you would like to say that we have not covered thus far?
I would say that I hope people will check out this documentary and want to watch it and share it in classrooms. I can't stress the classroom part enough because I really do believe that that's where it belongs. I don't believe it's a prime Netflix kind of situation. It's really a classroom tool. And that's why it's my absolute goal to work with these teachers to create this discussional guide and have it meet certain state educational standards because the time that we're in with all of this erasure and this, attack on history,
Mhm.
this is the stuff that we need in classrooms so we don't lose valuable information and facts on
Mhm.
on the history of events,
Mhm.
and so that's what I want to say is that I really did want to make sure I went into this documentary being completely factual. It was not bashing any one side or the other. It really was the facts.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest takeaway that I want to leave is that if you're somebody that's interested in history, Southern experience, humanities, the Black experience, this is something that you would appreciate and um, that you could find use for in your community as far as continuing any conversations that are being had around feeding yourselves as Black people, but then also just like I said, the generational wealth that we talked about. It's like how can you reestablish those things, or just creating um, those parts of your family that will live on past you. Just what can you do that can be multi-generational, that can
Mhm.
be here when you're gone or be here for your next generation. That's so important that we don't leave this life as individuals in these little silos, because it's so easy to do that too in these modern worlds as well, modern society, and we leave our village and we don't look back, but you got to look back because that's where you came from, and that's so much a part of where you're going, and so that's my biggest thing is finding this, hoping this documentary finds its way into classrooms and that it inspires people to be proud and to take control of their family's legacy.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that is a great way to segue into the questions that I ask of every guest. Because if I don't ask them, I'll get a message like, you didn't ask the questions. You always ask the questions. So I will ask the questions that I ask of every guest. So, what creative works are currently occupying your time? What are you reading? Are you watching anything fun? Listening into any, podcasts or anything like
Yeah.
that? Like, what occupies your time right now?
Yes, I'm definitely always thinking about what I want to, what subject I want to dive into next. So I've just
Mhm.
been consuming all kind of Mississippi history, just anything I find. Right now, I'm reading this book called, well, actually, it's a what do you call it, a new addition to this
Mhm.
book called Mississippi Conflict and Change. And it was a book published in like the 70s or something. And so it came out with an updated edition just like past year. And one of the professors who worked on that new edition, I had some exchanges with, so I wanted to check it out and support his work. But I'm really enjoying it, and it's really giving me all kinds of ideas into like what I want to do next. But definitely, like that's what I'm doing right now, is just consuming more Mississippi history. Mm-hmm.
What's one thing you will always be proud of?
Oh, my family. I'm so proud of those folks. Like, on Alex, I was just thinking about my great grandfather, and then I think about my grandfather, the one like I said, I did this as initially just an interview with my grandfather. So he turns 90 next month.
Oh, hey.
I know, and I'm so proud of him. Like, he's so independent, and he's just, I mean, he doesn't live with any of his children. He's just doing his own thing. And, he lives in like one of those like senior, apartments where,
Mhm.
it's like, just your neighbors are all your age. But,
Right.
I'm so proud of him. And I'm just so proud of my family and like what we've been able to do, just having come from that land. And that's what I mean about, the things that the generation before you has done. Do not forget that. Don't discount or ignore the fact that everything you are today is because of what they did for you, or for what they didn't even realize they were doing for you,
Mhm.
not necessarily for you, specifically, you weren't even a thought. But it's just the fact that they gave you such a head start. You have to acknowledge that and be grateful and be proud of that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself?
About myself.
Mhm.
Hmm. Um, I don't know. I think what comes to mind, and I don't know if this is the best answer, but what I'm thinking about is just how much of an advantage I had. That is something I never really thought about. And
Mhm.
I mean, I would think about it because I was a pretty introspective kid. So I'll be like, man, I have a car. That's a big deal, right?
Right.
Like I can drive to like college courses and do this dual enrollment, and my classmates necessarily can't do these things. So I already knew that I was privileged in that sense. And so that, I think, just understanding that even more, knowing that
Mhm.
it was even bigger than what my mom had provided for me. That has been surprising. I would say is that I just didn't realize that it's so much bigger than what you're doing right now today, and even what your mom did yesterday. It's everybody that came even before her.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I know you mentioned earlier that you get sort of like monthly updates from your film distributors, but is there anything or any screenings or like coming up that you know about right now?
Where I went to college, the university, Pace University, Westchester campus. So I've spoken with them. We'll do it sometime next semester. It's looking like October or so, but I haven't really announced it yet because they're still working out some details. But just finding some stuff in between that and now, and it's exciting. I'm excited.
Sounds exciting. And then lastly, where can the people find number one? information about your documentary online, but two, where can they find you online if they want to connect further?
I think the best way, the easiest thing to say that people can remember is filmfreeway.com/farm and freedom. And filmfreeway.com is a website that you have to be on to submit to film festivals. So that's kind of where I've also been able to drive people to, because I can also post links to, like, to the Collective Eye page so that you can buy the license and stuff like that. But that's the easiest website to remember, filmfreeway.com/farm and freedom.
And where can they find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Kayla Turner Thomas, or on Instagram as Sister K.
Well, those are all of my questions. This has been more enlightening than I envisioned when we started this whole process. I'm excited about your film distribution. I'm excited that you've started it and completed it, and now it's out in the world for people to see. And yeah, just, thank you for your efforts. Thank you for sharing your family a little bit with the general public, and your family history and everything. But yeah, this has been really, really great and inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you sharing your platform, and thank you. Thanks.
For more information, you can visit us online at www.blackinthestacks.com and find us on most social media platforms at Black in the Stacks.